Hey everybody, Donnie Turner here. Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first episode of the Buying Tampa Bay podcast. I'm so excited to be starting this new show simply because of our two co-hosts, Chase Clark and Peter Murphy. On this episode, they're giving us the due pleasure of sharing their wealth of knowledge, how they began in real estate, how they got started. They're going through their entire journey and to where they are today. This is actually a two-parter just because it's so extensive, and I hope you take the time to fully listen to this episode and the next, just to be able to glean as much wisdom as I did, honestly. So if you're interested in real estate, if you love this kind of content, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tell all your friends. It could help them to find this content, and it can really help us out at the show. So to talk a little bit about Chase Clark and Peter Murphy, I mean, they've both been 20-year investors here locally in the Tampa Bay area, one of the hottest housing markets in the U.S., and over their 20-year career, I mean, they've managed billions of dollars in real estate investments. They've worked with some of the largest real estate owners in the world, including Europe, California, and so forth, and they've transacted hundreds of investment deals. They themselves own and operate a large, substantial portfolio, multi-million dollars in the Tampa Bay area, and they've even bought and sold multiple companies, including one of the property management companies that they've started. They're going to share that story with us today. They have a wealth of experience, and they're ready and eager to share it. So go ahead and tune in. Let's get on with the show. Yeah, I think we could just get started.
Okay, sounds great. Well, so I got a economics degree from the University of South Florida, and my career path was going to go into management consulting. It was pre-9/11. There were some great management consulting jobs on the table. The career guidance office would post them on paper flyers outside their door back in that day. And I got a really good job right out of college working in the back office actuarial room of a management consulting firm. And, it was wonderful. A great experience doing a lot of technical stuff. And, sitting under fluorescent lights and gray cubicles all day was like as inspiring as it could get. But I brought in this houseplant. I mean, like full-on giant houseplant to brighten up my little 8x8 cubicle. And I set it out there on the table. It was like, I don't know, I think it was actually an herb, right? Because I was like, I need some green. And because I sat in the middle of the space and there was no window, I needed green, right? I mean, who doesn't need some green in their life? And that was, my first exposure to corporate America. It was just hardworking, fluorescent lights, kind of soul-sucking in lots of ways. I was well qualified for it through my degree, but I definitely knew that I wanted more. And, a progression, a series of jobs that I took every 2 years after that first job kind of reinforced that in me. I went through several different industries and several different companies, developing some range in my experience. But every single one of those steps showed me that, I'm learning some good stuff. I've got some professional growth and development, but I've got to have something more in my life, something entrepreneurial to really inspire me.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think you graduated like a semester before me. You graduated in May.
Right.
Okay, so I graduated in December. And this little thing happened in September of that year called the attack on America and the Twin Towers, right? Completely changed the entire landscape of careers, at the time, with hiring freezes, companies scaling back, all of this. And I was jealous because Peter was sitting in his Herman Miller chair in this fancy office in West Shore. And I go out with my resume, which I think is not too bad with my finance degree from USF. And the only people that came calling were these small community banks. Paying me, about $1,000 a month less than I thought I should be making. And great benefits, but very boring environment. I was doing the commute, sometimes with you, down to West Shore.
I remember it well.
Yeah, I went 45 to an hour and a half, depending on the weather, each way. And, I was sitting in an office. I had a nice office. You had a nice office. I had windows looking out on the Kennedy Boulevard.
It's high end.
I had, mahogany bookshelves, fancy bank stuff, really good.
And let me guess, you were vice president.
No, assistant vice president. Assistant vice president is where you start. It sounds really good.
Assistant to the vice president.
Yeah. Exactly. may remind you of a TV show. But yeah, we had this guy that ran the bank, was hard to work for, and lasted 6 months in that job, mainly because of the commute, until I found an accounting job that was much better. But one thing I got from that first bank job I had that was critical, I think, now when I look back at kind of the path we've taken through real estate, is that I was sitting there when I had work to do looking at commercial real estate loans. I was a credit analyst evaluating these guys that own commercial properties downtown in the Ybor and over on the beaches, and looking at their financials, evaluating these deals they wanted to buy or refinance. And it was kind of my first window into real estate from the money side to see how people did this, and how they were making it work. And really interesting to see that, but not interesting enough to keep me in that job at the time.
I hadn't thought before how parallel our experience was in analysis and evaluation and underwriting, because I did a lot of that for companies' health and welfare plans. But having that kind of technical knowledge and a very firm foundation in Excel and, just computer-based analytics has really served us well over time. I think it's been a differentiator.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, so many people get caught up sometimes in the emotion of real estate in particular, and being grounded in a numbers background with analysis and being able to really flesh out what's a deal and what doesn't just feel good ends up being critical if you're pursuing a path in real estate investment.
Could we take another step back real quick? So, yeah, what I'm hearing is that you guys were working these 9-to-5 jobs, and you guys were looking at these other people and looking at their deals and so forth. So was that your first encounter with real estate investment?
It definitely was my first window into what other people were doing. I'll be honest, I don't think at the time, because we're talking like this was 2002, end of 2001, 2002. I really didn't know enough about real estate at the time to really kind of say, oh, interesting, this is something I should pursue, because a lot of the guys I was looking, a lot of the deals I was looking at was guys with millions of dollars buying commercial buildings. I thought that was way outside my grasp at the time. A whole different league they were playing in, right? Here I am, barely making ends meet, paying off credit card debt and student loans, newly married, just bought my first home, and really no discretionary income to speak of.
But what we did have, maybe some of what our exposure was in the earliest of days was, kind of mentors. People that, in my case, maybe your case, I think your case too, went to our churches, right? And so guys that we trusted, and in my case, someone who I worked for one of his businesses when I was in high school, and he dabbled in real estate, and did more than dabble. He was really very successful in some of his real estate investments. And so there was that introduction and that desire to have what he had, that wonderful flexible life, and what seemed like at the time was boundless discretionary income. And knowing that it came from real estate and was definitely one of those things that kind of like sparks your attention, right?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is, but there must be something about, recent graduates from college, even in our time and now today, because the kids that ask me right now the most questions about real estate or want to become real estate investors are in the same position I was in back in 2002, right? Very little discretionary income. They somehow get exposed to the idea or the topic of real estate, and they get on fire about it. It's exciting. It's a really cool thing to envision for yourself down the road.
It is, especially because what they're looking at is us today, right? 20 years later. And us today, we don't look at all like those kids who started out their jobs in cubicle farms, right? Our lives, maybe we'll get to this at the end of the episode, but our lives are really wonderful now. We've got a high level of control over what we do. We are able to live, with the blessings that God and this industry have given us. And, it's a very attractive way of living. So you watch the people who have succeeded in real estate, and it does seem to have a lifestyle that is enviable, especially for someone coming out of college who they have all this freedom. That's the one thing they have. They don't want to give it up, right? And the prospect in front of them is give up all of that freedom for the stability of a 9-to-5 job. No wonder real estate looks so good to people.
Well, I love that you brought up. I mean, that's a large part of the why to invest in real estate. I think one thing that stuck out to me a little bit was how you guys figured out the how. I think starting off in trying to become a real estate investor, a lot of people, I think they look at house flipping, right? Value add, appreciation plays. I mean, you watch the Home Network all the time, and that's every single TV show is they buy a house on the courthouse steps and then they flip it. But it sounds like to me, you guys started off by learning how to underwrite and looking at net cash flow, which is, I think, kind of contrarian to most people's idea of real estate investing. Would you agree?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, I would advocate for that to start for anyone. You got to have an understanding of how the money works in order to understand what you even want to do with real estate investing, I think. One of the challenges is converting that why to the how. And I think the big challenge there is that so often when you're just out of college or you're in a position where you don't have a lot of discretionary income or a huge savings account, you think that it's insurmountable. But you go out on the internet or you buy these education programs or you listen to some guru on YouTube that tells you can do all this with other people's money. Mm. And so you start learning strategies about how to do it with other people's money. And sometimes that's easier said than done. Fortunately for us, we were able to figure out how to take advantage of one of those strategies with the very first deal that we did, and it happened to be a flip.
Well, that's an amazing segue. You want to go into that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was funny because here Peter and I are, working these desk jobs and looking for an opportunity to become investors, to get into the game, if you will. We kind of knew the why. We had this vision. We had explored some of the educational opportunities out there. We had talked to some mentors who had been very successful in real estate investing here locally and in other places that we had been. And the opportunity came up for us to be able to buy a deal subject to mortgage. It was a small condo here in Temple Terrace. Peter had a connection with the seller, found out about the deal. And so we were able to assemble several $1,000s in order to basically buy out her equity that she had in the condo and take over her mortgage payments, which is what a subject to deal is. And we can delve into more details that are involved with that, maybe in a later pod when we talk about specific strategy. But
basically you assumed her loan? Is that kind of how it works?
We didn't even assume it. We just took over the payments. We didn't go through a process to qualify with that bank. We actually didn't even tell the bank that we were going to be making the payments for her. And we truly just picked up the payments that she had on that loan and agreed to do that for a period of time until we could sell the property again. And that's basically how a subject to deal works. A lot of times you buy out the equity up front of the person that owns the property, or you buy out a portion of it and promise the other portion at the end. And then in the meantime, instead of you having to get a new loan or qualify for financing or bring your own cash to the table, you use the loan that's already in place on the property and you pick up the payments while you do the renovation and then while you sell.
So the lady had a lot of trust in you.
And vice versa, right? I mean, so she was able to, if I'm not mistaken in this deal, boy, it's getting back there, she retained her title interest in the property while we negotiated this deal, which was going to be an eventual sale, right? She just didn't want to have two mortgages. A lot of people don't want two mortgages. I get it, right? So we were going to orchestrate, we're going to rehab the property slightly for her, and then we're going to sell the property. But anytime, technically, she could have decided to say, no, I'm not going to do this deal anymore, and would have still been on title as the owner, and could have stiffed us, right? Right out of the gate, we find a deal. where there's potential, where she has a need and we have an opportunity, but there's a lot of trust at play. And there's also so much ignorance. I mean, maybe so much ignorance that you have no idea of the risk that you could actually, how much you could actually lose in this deal. But because you're so like massively ignorant, you still do the deal. And it ends up working out of sheer luck or God's sheer gift to you, and almost nothing that you did except that you just, fell into a situation that ended up working out pretty well for you. Well, that's kind of our first deal. And I want to suggest that's probably a lot of people's first deals. What they don't know could fill volumes of books. And because of that ignorance, they don't have as much fear, right? And so they go in headstrong, and it works out. A lot of times it works out. For us, it did. But it wasn't a home run. It's not like we made tens of thousands of dollars on that deal. Boy, what did we make? Was it $9,000?
I think we made about what we put in. We put in 9,000, and I think we made 9,000.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we put in 9. We had 9 to start, and then we had 18 afterwards. But for risk averse people that are jumping into real estate, which can be a very risky investment, approaching it from the standpoint of what's the worst thing that can happen is sometimes how you got to get your first deal done. And in our case, we didn't have a ton of risk. I mean, $9,000 is a lot of money. There were 3 of us involved. We each put in $3,000. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a lot to lose. We weren't going to mortgage our homes or sell the farm to get this first flip done.
Did you guys feel like it was a victory when that happened? Were you guys like, okay, this is real? Or what did you guys think?
Oh, yeah.
We did celebrate it, but it took a whole lot longer than we thought it should take. And I remember I was flying back from a business trip when I got the text from Chase. He was back in Tampa, that the deal had finally closed and we had our $9,000. And so, we've never been big to really celebrate our victories. That's probably a shortcoming. We should do more of that.
Yeah.
I mean, once or twice we've gone somewhere fun after we've done a deal. Most of the time it's like, deal's done, okay, let's move on to the next. But we were very happy. We didn't lose money. We doubled our money, and now we had seed capital to do something interesting. And so we did. I mean, there were a couple of interesting things that happened fairly quickly after that we were able to take advantage of.
Yeah, and just one more point on that first deal is that you can read all the books that you want, and you can listen to all the gurus that are out there, but until you actually have money on the line and you get in the trenches and you're painting walls and cleaning carpets on your first deal and fixing bifold doors, there's just no substitute for that. You cannot replace that experience with any kind of education or hypothetical scenario or anything like that. And so to get that first deal done, while we may not have celebrated it enough, in hindsight, it was monumental to our success, because until you get the first deal done, you don't have any skin in the game.
Good one. I'd love to add a point about that as well. You're going to talk to a lot of mentors, and your mentors are going to give you some great advice. But until your mentors see you actually take their advice and do something with it, they're going to just sit on the sidelines, because they're approached by lots of people, as are we, who say they want to get into this industry. And we talk to them and give them good advice, and then we kind of skeptically sit back, because there's a really good chance, if I throw a percentage at it, 99% of those people are going to do nothing. And so there's not a ton of competition out there for guys who are going to do something. Lots of competition for guys seeking advice, but the guys who do something are the minority. Just do something with that knowledge that you've earned from your mentors and from the books that you've read. Try it. What's the worst that can happen?
Even if you slip and fall, even if it's the wrong thing?
Yes.
Just do something?
And you just paid a lot of money for school, and you're used to doing that. Goodness, aren't you? You got student loans.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue into the next phase of what we did, because the best lessons you'll learn are from failure. No doubt. I mean, when everything's going good and you're making money and you're picking all the right deals and you just can't help but make money on everything you touch, you tend to get sloppy. And you start ignoring critical, fundamental real estate investing principles. And you don't knowingly do it, but you realize you're doing it when you start to fail. And we experienced, a good chunk of failure, if you will, along the way, which is a catalyst for why we've been able to successfully be real estate investors and cultivate a portfolio of rental properties over the past 10, 15 years at this point.
Well, people. I just wanted to touch back on what you said. Like 99% of the people, they don't do anything. Do you think, is it fear or is it like a lack of discipline? Do you think?
Oh boy, well, let me address that. I think it could be both, but I certainly think fear is a big factor here. I think people trump up the difficulty, the complexity, and the chance of loss in their lives way too much. Just about almost every decision they're getting ready to face. And so certainly fear is playing a big role in that.
Okay, well, when we first recorded this the first time, we talked about it a little bit. Not this time, but you guys. Did you guys leave careers when you did this deal, or were you still in your careers?
We were still in our careers. We
Yeah.
didn't leave until this next phase of our life. And so to maybe answer the second question, discipline was critical in taking our success, that first success, and demonstrating consistent results after that. And we did have consistent results before we started to fail, which was a factor of a variety of things. But we went through a stage of our life after this first deal where we used this money, this $18,000, didn't take a penny of it for personal gain, and reinvested it in a variety of deals. Most of them were in low-income multifamily properties, where at the time we were able to find almost 100% financing to buy up these income properties, which now is unheard of, but back then it was available to us. And we had a realtor, and bless her heart, she was probably just starting out at the time. Colleen was her name, and she would show us all the duplexes and triplexes that we wanted to see. And, she was a residential realtor. So, marching her through these homes, in her heels, which were horrible, homes in the middle of the hood. She's like, I've never been in this neighborhood before. Neither have we, but doesn't this smell like money? And, money always smells like dirt when it first starts out, like real dirt, like armpit dirt, right? So that's what this smelled like. You're walking through these homes and you see all this opportunity because you're young and ambitious and the sky's the limit. But these homes need tons of work and the tenants are of ill repute and they're not cash flowing. That's why they're being sold probably because they're being undermanaged. Mm-hmm. And we blocked out all of those realities to make a series of purchases. And we assembled a portfolio of income producing assets. Over the course of a few years, really 4 years, we bought 5 or 6 income-producing assets, and we only flipped one property because one of those homes had the opportunity for an outsized gain. And in that flip, we took in about $100,000 in income just because it was a fevered pitch of the housing market. And how can you not take that kind of a return opportunity when it's faced your way? But we still didn't spend a penny of it, right? I don't think we spent any of it on fun or pleasure or celebration. We sunk it all right back in.
Thankfully. Bought one of our best properties that we've ever had, one that we still own today. Have owned it for 16 years.
What year is this?
This
when
is
all this
06.
is going down? 06, okay.
2006. This would have been in March-ish, sometime around the beginning of the year in 2006. So we're still, I don't know, a good year and a half out from everything coming crashing down.
From destruction.
Yeah.
But we didn't know it. But things were slowing down at the time. And in retrospect, everyone knew it. Prices were going to peak at the summer of 2006. And so the properties we were buying, we were paying very high prices for, but they cash flowed, albeit meagerly. We had some properties that were cash flowing like $1. But because the market was appreciating at 25% a year at that time, it was how can we go wrong, right?
And we had 100% financing.
100% financing, 25% appreciation, 0 break even, but, by our analysis.
We were buying $250,000 quads and bringing $3,000 to closing for closing costs.
Wow.
It was that crazy.
Well, during this stage of your guys' investment career, did you guys have an investment thesis? Were you guys we want net cash flow, or were you just in on the fever pitch of appreciation?
Most certainly we had a thesis. And so cash flow was critical to us. But we defined it loosely, right? Cash flow was like $1, right? If you could break even on a property, you were cash flow positive, right?
Yeah.
Break
Positive
even
cash flow.
We evaluated a couple properties that had $10 in positive cash flow. And we're it's a deal. Let's do it,
With what we thought were conservative assumptions.
Oh, they were.
Things like collections and repair and things like that.
And we wouldn't have known any differently until the market started to collapse and default and maintenance started to run right up. Those were the things that really hurt us because our evaluations were so incredibly liberal. But that was our thesis, and we were executing it. We were not deviating from our thesis. All around us, guys were flipping and making big money, driving big cars, and being gurus. And that wasn't us. I mean, it was like me and Chase pulling up in our economy vehicles with our own hammers. I mean, we were doing our own repairs, breaking even on homes because this was our mode. Yeah. And we were hedgehogs, and we were grinding away at income properties. And well, it had worked out pretty well for us long term. We didn't lose anywhere close to as much as what flippers lost. It ended up being a very good strategy for us, but the discipline was what helped us execute that at a high level, I think.
You know, it's funny too. I'm looking at this list of properties that we bought during this time period, and outside of Linebaugh, I don't remember, even in our portfolio today, our biggest successes have come from properties that weren't publicly marketed. Every single one of these properties was marketed on MLS. I can't remember a single property we bought off MLS that has been a really good deal for us. That would be top 10.
Yeah, that's a good question. None are coming to mind.
Even our portfolio today, if you look at our portfolio today, I think almost every one of those properties was bought off market.
Yeah, that's an interesting fact.
How are you sourcing those?
Through connections, word of mouth, sphere of influence, wholesalers in the area. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think about it. That had not dawned on me until I started looking at this list of properties. And the majority of the stuff that we bought with this agent that we worked with, and we only bought a few because by 2006, Peter had his real estate license. And shortly after that became a broker, and then he was sourcing all the deals for us. And then I had then left my job and gone into the mortgage business and was working in residential mortgages for a year and a half. And so what we tried to do was leave our unrelated jobs, get into industry-related fields to further our education while still providing ourselves with a monthly income or an income of some sort, aside from what we were gaining from investing in real estate. Well, and that was a good launching pad for us.
To the aspiring investors listening, do you think that's still a wise path? Maybe get into realty or brokerage to get into real estate? What do you guys think?
It depends on the market. I don't think it was a wonderful path or a wonderful opportunity back when we first got into it. It was just closely related, and so you were learning a lot of great information. And we were saving money on commissions. Like we weren't paying another realtor that. We were taking that in ourselves. So I don't think we would have viewed it, and I wouldn't view it now even as a huge income opportunity. I'll view it as just a very important tool to have, very important training, as a credibility builder in lots of ways. So getting into mortgages or real estate will be something you will find very useful as you develop out your real estate investment strategy.
Okay, so you guys are, your investment thesis is positive cash flow, $10, and basically self-sustaining properties and holding on for appreciation is kind of what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think holding on for appreciation was an afterthought of sorts because I think we all wanted better yielding properties than $10 a month, right? Mm-hmm. But that was hard to find. Yeah. And so we thought that appreciation would buoy everyone's ship, right? It would raise rents, it would raise values, we could refinance and cash out and continue our strategy. But when that didn't happen because housing market correction, things really got shaky. And that was really probably the next period of time we faced in our careers because we assembled a really nice portfolio of somewhat cash flowing properties. And some of those performed a whole lot better than the others. But some of them, those ones that we bought that were marginal, when the housing market crashed, when people lost their jobs, rents stopped flowing in, maintenance costs went way up on these properties. And all of those yield models, all that analysis that we did, proved woefully liberal. And what we were discovering was that our expenses were well in excess of the income of our portfolio. Many other people were discovering similar things, like I can't sell this house, which I took out 100% financing on, and also went and got hard money, and now I've got to now I can't afford the rent or the mortgage because there's no income and I can't flip it. People were discovering that all over the place. We were mainly discovering that our expenses were too high. So while lots of people were giving homes back to the bank and having to get foreclosed on, what we were dealing with was just year after year of loss. It ended up in the same place, but what we were able to experience during those years and years of loss was a very expensive and very important school where we learned how to manage real estate in very tight economic conditions. So when rents are low, when maintenance costs are high, how do you keep real estate solvent? How do you keep your portfolio performing? We learned that through the School of Hard Knocks during pretty much 2008 through 2010.
Yeah, that's right. Because, when we bought these properties and they were $1 or $10 positive cash flow, our forecast said that, hey, in year 2, it's going to be $100 a month and $200 a month and $300 a month. We planned on rents continuing to escalate. We, 2 years in to being real estate investors in a buy and hold multifamily portfolio, didn't truly understand escalating property taxes. And how here in this county, taxes on investors in a rising value market continue to escalate at 10% a year. Insurance costs are erratic. You can be up 30% one year on your insurance premiums. So all of these kinds of things we learned, like Peter said, through the School of Hard Knocks, and truly experiencing them in real time. And, today I can say, 15 years in, all these things are now accounted for, completely and fully in every model and every forecast we give. But we didn't understand that in 06. 2 years in, that kind of stuff you just don't quite grasp until somebody shows it to you or you start to feel the pain.
And it's very hard to recover from it. I think that's what we discovered there. With all of our good intentions and we had a strong value compass that said we're not going to default on these loans. But it got to the point on some of these properties where our families were pretty much near bankruptcy. We had lost almost all of our free cash. We had no cash flow from the properties. The wolf was definitely at the door. And at that period of time, there were bailouts for banks and programs for people like us. There were short sale programs, deed in lieu of foreclosure programs, and other things that allowed us to avoid just foreclosure in an outright sense, but also made it necessary at the time for us to go through that really hard process of short sales on a couple of our properties, or a deed in lieu of foreclosures and some others. Man, Chase, I remember those conversations in the evenings. You're really stressed out because the day was so that it's imminent and you can no longer carry this property. And we were wrangling with the ethical implications of that. Can a person with my values compass, essentially default on his word to pay a mortgage, right? The really serious and heavy conversations for young people trying to do their best, trying to have made good decisions and do their best. At the end of the day, we concluded that was something we had to do to keep our families intact, right? And to make certain that we had food left on the table. And of course, there were programs where lenders essentially were like, yeah, we'll help you out in these scenarios. We took advantage of some of those. We took advantage of quite a few for some of our properties. And of that original property list, we probably lost 90% of it in that period of failure because we were unable to hold on to those assets that were so heavily leveraged. It was a really painful time.
Yeah, it was interesting because we weren't living high on the hog either. I think our monthly household budgets were around $3,000 a month that made ends meet for us, and we scraped every penny we could find out of these properties to pay the necessary expenses. And we had to pay HOA first, water bills first, electric bills first. And by the time we got around to, do we have anything left to pay the mortgage? Sometimes it was like, this lender's telling us we've got to skip 3 payments before we can enter into their forbearance program or their short sale program or be eligible for any of this assistance. And we made that critical choice not to bankrupt ourselves personally and to try and satisfy lost leaders, I guess you might say. That might be a loose term for it, but and with other opportunities on the table to help mitigate some of this, financial problem we had with these properties.
Yeah, we had no hope of salvaging some of these properties as investments. But what we were learning at the time were all these skills on how to manage rental portfolios, through really, really bad times. And what we started to observe was that a lot of clients were in the same boat as we were. They had properties they needed to have managed during the bad times. And not all of them were in as bad a spot as we were. They were actually going to be able to hold on to their properties, but many were. And so what we were able to do at that time was kind of start helping some of our clients who needed the exact same thing that we needed, which was which was sophisticated property management in a down economy. And I remember, Chase, do you remember that conversation where we were losing everything everywhere, but property management started to become an opportunity for income for us? We would make like $100 one month. We were like, hey, maybe this is a business. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe we could actually learn from what we're doing right now and make some money in property management to help us buy the time and get out of this mess so we can get back into residential, into investment properties again. And there was that 1 month where we knew, because of all these factors, that if we didn't get income flowing from one place or another, that we were going to have to hang it up. We were going to go back and get conventional jobs. We were going to have to quit this industry. And almost like some divine intervention, in that month, we sold enough property management accounts to some of our clients that we were able to keep the lights on, that we were able to cover our $3,000 a month lifestyle, right? And not close the doors. And it was once that month hit that I think the lights started going on in our brains that this is what we need to do to survive.
Yeah, it was interesting. I remember that moment when we started to realize, wait, hold on. By managing this property for this investor, we're making more money than we were when we owned a property just like this every month. And
Yes.
that's when the light bulbs really started to come on. Like, okay. But then the flip side of that is we're sitting here now in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, watching guys buy properties for a quarter of what we had paid for them just 2-3 years earlier. And looking at that, for me, somewhat in awe, thinking, man, these guys are going to make a killing.
Yeah.
But, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I don't know, man, we just lost our shirt on deals just like this. I wonder how this will play out down the road. It was kind of like this dichotomy of thinking of, wow, this is such a great deal, but at the same time thinking, well, I don't know if it's too much risk for me to ever jump back in, given what I just went through.
Right. We were burned.
Yeah.
We were severely burned. And as we watched other people who hadn't been as badly burned or who'd sat on the sidelines through some of the hysteria of the housing market, they were probably smarter than us, Chase.
Yeah.
They were like, this is insanity, and you can't buy a property with $10 of cash flow and hope to survive. And so the wiser money probably waited it out and said, this is going to just hit the fan in a big way. And when it did, they were able to buy properties, my goodness, 10% in some cases of the price that we had paid for them.
Wow.
Because the whole market was crashing all around us. And the economy is a cruel teacher, right? Because since we had to go through all that distress and short sale properties and spend all of our savings, we didn't have a penny to take advantage of much of that early market recovery opportunity that had exhibited itself. It took us a few years before we could get in on that, and we had to watch from the sidelines, right? Kind of like punishment, honestly. You guys messed up, sit it out for a couple of quarters. Let's see if you guys can get back in the game or are smart enough to get back in the game in a few years.
But remember what our first attempt was? Our first attempt to fix our cash flow problem was to wholesale property. I remember, even in 08, right before we made our commitment 100% to go in with PM, we were tying up properties under contract at low prices and turning around and flipping them and doing a simultaneous close and making $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000. And we did that a couple times, and we did it enough, actually, early in 2008 to sit down and have a debate over which path we should pursue. Should we continue flipping houses, or should we go full-fledged into property management where we know we can create a stable income for ourselves? And so that was an interesting time at first. I remember early in 08, before we moved our office out of Ybor, when we had some of these clients from California that were coming in, and we were able to turn maybe 3 or 4 properties I think we got under our belt early that year.
Yeah, we had a business colleague at the time. He really wanted to go heavily into flipping, doing these assignments of deals. And Chase and I, because we were still so shell-shocked from the housing collapse, we're like, no, we're okay if we make just $100 a deal. We don't need to make $10,000 a deal. And it was like two roads diverging, right? Mm-hmm. We were unable, for a variety of reasons, to unify those two strategies in one house. Yeah. And that one colleague went off into investments and flipping, and we went off in the direction of property management.
Yep.
And the rest, maybe it's too simple to say the rest is history. It's not like we never were able to get back into investments again, but that began a series of some of the most rewarding, serendipitous, providential events of our professional life. In the subsequent years after the housing market collapsed, really commencing in 2008, we were able to assemble a very large, gradually, but a very large portfolio of properties under management, where we were managing properties for our clients, just like what we've talked about here. We became, over the course of those 2 or 3 years, the largest manager of single-family properties in Tampa. And took that to the bank, marketed that a lot, talked a lot about that. And the more we talked about that, the more new accounts would come in. It was also at that time that we began to take a very active role in media and PR, talking about the state of the housing market, and its decline and its resurgent potential. And so we started gaining, I think, somewhat of a national reputation for what we were doing in this market. And that was really providential, because it was right around 2011, maybe 2012, where big institutional money began to move into our housing market, to invest in the carnage, to feast off the corpses of houses that littered the landscape of Florida.
Do they rhyme with Blackstone? Or?
That's it. That's the one, right? Yeah, it did. Blackstone.
Invitation Homes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Colony Finance. Progress Residential. Big names in fintech, right? We're starting to look at housing as a critical element of their investment strategies. And Florida was ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny, even before that, what's remarkable to me is the resilience of some of these real estate guys in our local market. Because we rode the wave with a lot of these guys here in Tampa, and we saw them crash just as hard as we did. But as soon as the foreclosure faucet turned on and cheap properties were available on the market to be bought, not only did these guys pivot, did a 180 from being in the cellar, losing their shirts, to peddling properties to people literally from all over the world. The amount of money that flowed into Florida, and specifically even just the Tampa Bay area, from Europe and Asia and the Middle East and all over this country, was incredible. And thousands of properties were being sold every year to new investors. They didn't live here. And one of the big opportunities we saw in property management were teaming up with some of these investment groups. And these were years before these institutional guys came in. The institutional guys need a proof of concept. So they looked out and they saw all these other investors doing this, and they're like, okay, that seems to work. Now let's investigate. They came rolling in, about 3 or 4 years after the fact, which is interesting, and they still made a killing. But some of these early on investment groups that were marketing bulk packages of properties and even individual properties to people in Europe and France and Ireland and Belgium and all these places were quite remarkable. And it was interesting to get in on that a little bit on the management side, because none of these guys wanted to touch management. They were turning deals right and left at a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 clip. They didn't have time to make $100 a month. They didn't care about $100 a month. They freely gave that away to us. Little did they know that you build up a portfolio of 3,000 or 4,000 properties making $100 a month, and, you got a pretty nice sticky income.
Yeah, I'm really glad you took us back to that, because those early movers from Europe and Asia, they proved the Tampa market, the concept, as viable for Wall Street, and they really did set the stage for the boom. Tampa now is a very attractive market internationally for the growth that we're experiencing here. And so we're really lucky to be here in Tampa. But 10 years ago is when that started, because as a small, sleepy secondary market decimated by the housing crash, people looked at Tampa and still thought, that's a pretty amazing place to be. The sun shines like 360 days a year. The average temperature is 60 degrees. It's close to beaches. The prices of homes are relatively low compared to just about any city in the U.S. We should be in there. And Europeans, and some of these small, almost like family office groups were the first groups to really see that, even before Wall Street. So big hats off to them for seeing the opportunity.
Well, it speaks to your guys' ability of being able to, systemize and duplicate and automate systems. Because it sounds like with all these, early adopters, these new investors, it sounds like how quick did this property management business grow?
Well, it was growing fast. And, in relative terms, I remember, many months where we were bringing in multiple units every day. Wow. Our average growth clip was about 30% year over year. sometimes faster than that, but on the average, I think for about 5 or 6 years, we grew about 30% a year, the portfolio. And that's with, property churn as well. I mean, some of these guys didn't hold their properties very long. They got in, felt like they weren't sure where it was going, did a quick flip and got out, so we maybe managed it for a year. Others held on, buying properties in 08 and 09 and holding them until today. And liquidating in the last, 12 to 24 months at an outrageous ROI.
Smart money.
It was very smart money. So yeah, it was a good ride, and it gave us the opportunity to do something we had never done before, and that was create a legitimate organization where we had employees, we had structure, we had departments. We had to really build out a company, and that was something unique in the real estate industry because most real estate operations and outfits don't really need that kind of stuff. Most people in the industry are commission-based or they're sales-oriented, and so they've got a sales organization or a sales structure. But we needed call centers. We needed maintenance teams. We needed, coordinators. We needed property managers. We needed leasing agents. I mean, we needed to build out a complete corporate structure to operate this new business coming in. And so that was a lot of fun in the early days.
What did that look like? Was it, you guys came from corporate America, what you didn't want. So being able to start from scratch, and make it in your own image, like I would assume there probably wasn't a lot of bureaucracy. How did that look? How did that look?
It was wonderful. I mean, we put together an organization that was nimble and efficient. We eschewed Class A office space, at least initially. We had great facilities. We had lots of flexibility. I think we put a lot of trust in our people to make good calls. We brought in people who wouldn't normally pass the smell test at corporate America because we knew they had street smarts and they were able to work in property management, which is very dirty and a very challenging industry and requires a lot of savvy, just street savvy. And so we were able to bring in good people to get the job done, even if they didn't look like what you'd expect in a big corporation. And we put together a wonderful organization that just had none of the trappings of corporate America until we got to a level of growth because of this institutional client movement into our space where we started thinking that was important, that we needed to have an organization that looked a little bit more buttoned up. And so we did move eventually into some Class A office space. And we, had all, the things that you would expect, the weekly meetings, the motivational efforts, the structure and the organization within an institution that you need to have to show legitimacy to Wall Street types. But we felt like we never lost the culture that was so important for creating success. And that was a customer service-centered culture and one where our values, where the freedom to express and live your values could really shine. And early on there, toward the end, as we were making all this official, one of the things we put in place was this customer service promise, where not only were we promising to our clients that we would live and execute, their processes according to a high standard of ethical integrity, we made those same commitments to one another, and we empowered everyone with the ability to kind of say, if this is not right for you, if you're not able to come to work and be the best version of yourself that you can be, then we will help you either find a better opportunity within the company or give you resounding, employer recommendations to go elsewhere and find where you can be inspired and live to be the best version of yourself, right? And this is super important to us, and we think it created a wonderful culture of collaboration, of success, and it was a big part of our success for a long time.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, we really didn't have a playbook for it. We hadn't done it before as far as building an organization, and a lot of it was done with grit and fake it till you make it kind of philosophy in a lot of things, trial and error. And fortunately, like Peter mentioned, we were blessed with a lot of great people to fill our organization in the early days that helped us establish that real good kind of gritty startup culture where everyone was highly motivated, everyone was having fun, people were doing things they'd never done before, and we were all just making it happen. And there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot of fun and excitement involved in that. It's the kind of culture that gets you there at 5:30 in the morning and keeps you there as late as you got to be, and there's never a dull moment. There's plenty of work to go around, sometimes too much work to go around. You don't have enough people. But we grew it in a very measured way. We never got too big for our britches, you might say, as far as how we grew the company or the policies we put in place to kind of take care of people. And
or like the trappings of corporate greed, right? I mean, we never advanced, we never bought luxury vehicles. We never mandated like flashy dress codes. The things that you see organizations do as they start to lose their soul to wealth.
Yeah.
That really wasn't us. And I think it helped.
Yeah, I think so. One of the more interesting things we went through in the growth of the institution was when we started to acquire other books of business from other property management companies and expand our footprint across the entire state of Florida. We bought a portfolio out of Orlando. We bought one down in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. We bought one in Jacksonville, and then we bought one in Ocala. And that was the original spreading our wings across the state of Florida to kind of expand our footprint and kind of give us more opportunity for growth, but also make us look like a legitimate corporate player in the industry. As the institutions came in and we started to see more of this institutional mentality, we kind of wanted to look like that and act like that. And so we tried to conform. And some of it worked, some of it didn't work so great. But in the end, it led to our eventual exit from that company in 2016.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so what I'm hearing is you guys in the beginning were kind of like Apple out of the garage, right? Sort of like Apple versus IBM, square pegs in the round holes, the rebels, going in there, doing the dirty work, repairs, collecting rents and all that stuff. And it sounds like you guys were having a lot of fun. I mean, so you guys progressed down that path, you grew, you were acquiring portfolios and then wooing the institutional during that process, and I guess becoming more formalized, was your guys' love for the business waning, or how did that feel?
It's a good question. Our love for the politics, and because politics naturally comes, and must come to some degree or other, we never had a lot of love lost between us and politics and for convention. And so we tried to move some of that away and tried to not have a lot of that. I would say that we never lost love for the core of the business because it's such an important thing. It was such an important thing to us personally to have performing real estate. We owned it and we needed it for our clients. So that never went away. But our lives certainly became satiated with people management. Mm-hmm. And so that was a change. We had to learn to love that. I think that's the kind of thing that doesn't come naturally all the time to you as being a critically important thing. You can spend a lot of time when you have a big organization managing people problems. And then you can go home and feel like, well, I didn't get any work done. But the truth of the matter is you got the only work done that mattered for you because you're the only person in that organization that can manage the people problems. At the highest level of your professional development, you're a people developer. And the systems, hopefully if you create good ones, are maintained and developed by your employees, by the organization in general. But your job is to develop the people within your company. And so we had to learn that, and it didn't come all that naturally. But now that we're a small organization, again, we've moved out of that large group, that's the part of the business that I miss the most because it was the most rewarding aspect of the business.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. When you're in the thick of it, it's the thing you hate, right? You relish the days of the startup culture and the excitement and the not knowing what's coming around the next curve kind of mentality. And then you get institutionalized when you settle into this, employee management culture, which is what it was. I mean, I think in 2013, we're operating out of about 1,200 square foot of office space and on the second floor of an apartment complex office. And we've got 80 plus maintenance guys running all over the state of Florida. We've got a staff of probably 40 or 50 admins in the office, wow, including agents and leasing agents and property managers and, you name it. And at that point, it was truly running an organization, not living in the real estate world. You know, we were in real estate, that was our industry, but we were managing a business at that point. We weren't property managing. So it's kind of interesting. You know, another thing that was really interesting about that is as you grow as an organization and you don't have a lot of experience inside of a corporate world, you haven't been in HR departments, trying to figure out what sufficiently motivates employees. You know, what a comp package should look like, what benefits should be offered. All that kind of stuff is very difficult when you're dealing directly with people's lives. Yeah. And we probably made a lot of mistakes in that front, giving too much at some times, not giving enough at other times, trying to figure out that happy medium, you know, to keep people motivated, compensate them competitively. And but the one thing throughout all of this that I think, and Peter kind of touched on this a minute ago, is we were able to stay true to our values. We were home for dinner every night. We treated our people with respect. We tried to live out the Christian values in our lives inside the company that we tried to profess to them, and the standard that we held them to. And I think we made a lot of positive impacts along the way, because people saw us having success in business, even being part of our organization, but not seeing us buying fancy cars and living extravagantly and doing things like that at the expense of the employees or at the expense of our families or our church involvement or things like that. And I think staying true to our values throughout this entire process and staying grounded in that way. And I'll give a lot of credit to my wife for that. You know, she's the one that quite often keeps me honest, you know, during times of doubt in regards to those things. And that was the difference maker.
Yeah, without a doubt it was. And it was so rewarding to see the positive changes you were able to make in people's lives. And that sounds, I know, a little bit prosaic. Like everyone says that when they run a company. But you see your people within your organization's lives improving, not just monetarily, but their relationships with their kids and families. And that is unspeakably rewarding. It was a really great time. Maybe we should just spot the minute marker here, because what remains in this story is a very important segment, because it relates to, that relates to the whys behind growing a real estate business. Yeah. And I don't want to shortchange it, but I know that you're running up against a hard stop.
Yeah, we got like 7 or 8 more minutes, probably.
Right. No, I mean, that's probably a good place to start. We can do part 2 next time. Yeah. But no, that was beautiful. I know from my own personal experience, when we were building out those Domino's Pizza stores in Sacramento, I mean, the bonus checks were nice and all that, but the most fulfillment I got out of it was opening a store in the middle of nowhere that has never seen a Domino's Pizza store and creating 50 jobs. Yeah. And then seeing what that can do for people. A lot of my best drivers that I hired, this was their second job on top of their full-time job. You know what I mean? They got off at 5 p.m., they'd come to the store, and then they'd work another 4 hours and get home by 10 p.m., but they were the hardest workers, and they loved the supplemental income and all this and that. And just to see what that could do for them and their families, it's a small thing compared to what you guys are doing, but it was, I did feel the impact. And showing, I love that you mentioned just the Christian example and all this and that. I mean, when you treat people with respect and treat them as human beings from, the spirit of Jesus Christ, people, they feel that difference, because that's just not to be seen, in the business world. And you stick out so much. And I do think that they do reciprocate. The good ones do. The good ones stick around and they reciprocate. The bad ones, they might take advantage, but they don't last.
Well, one of the most rewarding things was to see people leave jobs that I probably thought were better than what we had to offer, but come work for us because they wanted to be a part of what we were doing. Yeah. I mean, and that, that was probably one of the most rewarding things that I got out of the whole experience. I mean, financial benefit aside, having the people was really, it was just something special.
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm in IO psychology right now, industrial psychology, and it's kind of like psychology applied to business. Yeah. And last night, it's a night class, so we were talking about two employees. One of them is like a legacy employee. He's been with the company for like 45 years. Good employee, good attitude and all that. And then the other one, he's a younger employee. He's been there for 5 years, but he's helped turn the company around and turned it profitable. And they were saying that the company has the downsize. One of them has to be let go. Who lets go? And then we had like an in-class debate and all of that. And then I went with the older guy, the legacy guy. And then everybody else a lot of people went with the other guy. And they were saying that, like, none of that stuff matters. It's all about performance. It's all about that, this and that. I come in with a little bit more different perspective, right? I'm opposite. I had a full career, and now I'm going into, the theory of the classroom. And I just knew immediately when everybody was talking that way, I was like, you've never fired somebody before.
That's right.
You've never looked into somebody's eyes and realize and understand that when I let go of this person, the ability for them to provide for their family just evaporated. And they're going to have to figure out and replace that income, It's a real thing.
It's so real. I mean, some of these people that maybe aren't the highest performers in your organization are the keeper of corporate culture, right? And the maintainer of, like, some of this social traditions that, like, hold your organization together. Like the person who does Thanksgiving dinner for your organization every year, who makes that potluck work and sets the table, and you're so tempted to think that's such soft stuff and it doesn't add anything to the bottom line, except it adds an uncalculable amount to the bottom line. I mean, it's hard to put a number on it, truly, and that's why people even don't. But, like, what is it worth to have someone there who can preserve your culture, who can tie everyone together to make them act like a family? I mean, that kind of bond is worth more than a lot of sales sometimes. And having that realization with your organization takes maturity, right? Because we were very tempted early on to, like, guys not performing, cut them, right? Yeah. But it's the same thing. It's like, well, what are you really cutting? What are you losing by letting that legacy employee walk out the door? Maybe more than you can ever know.
Or they're just in the wrong seat on the bus. That was another thing. I forget, was that Good to Great?
Yes, it was.
We read that book and talked about it as a company, and then, that idea of, the person is right for the business. They just might not be in the right job. They might need a different seat on the bus. And we did some of that. We moved some people around to try and put them in a position to succeed because they were the right values fit for us. In fact, I was thinking back and I was like, we did have to fire people. I mean, I remember sitting there firing two different people. And they were both for values issues. I mean, it wasn't because they weren't performing. It was because they had done something that was contrary to, our corporate core values. And that's when you've got to get people off the bus. Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do. Because, like you said, I mean, you're messing with their personal life and their ability to make a living. But it wasn't a rash thing to ever let someone go. It was that, they had demonstrated over time that they just weren't the right cultural fit for our values.
Yeah, it's almost a conundrum. It's almost antithetical, but you're right. I mean, I've had to cut people too, just to preserve the whole. Yeah. Right? I mean, in the same way as we have these people that keep the organization strong and healthy, you got to cut out the cancer while it's early, right?
That's right. That's right. And some of that's instinctive, right? You see someone operate, you're like, I'm not sure this guy's a good player. I don't know what exactly it is, but he's not a fit, right? And hopefully you're also developing those kinds of instincts, not only so you can make excellent investment decisions for buying and selling and management, but so you can make right people development decisions. And some of those things, again, hard to quantify, but you can smell it. You just can, right? And so, a mature professional develops that skill along the process.
Yeah, and one of the things I remember too in regard to that is you can't stay on top of everything. As a manager, at some point after your team gets to a sufficient size, you're viewed in that ivory tower mentality by a lot of your people sometimes. So it's hard for you to really know everything that's going on, but you know that you've instilled the right culture in your company when other people come to you as the manager and say, look, Johnny over here is not living the corporate values. Here's what they're doing, here's what they're saying. When you have your people coming to you to tell you that some people they work with need to get off the bus, I think you've done a good job of instilling your values in your team.
That's incredible.
Because they don't want that cancer.
Yeah.
They love the culture, they love the environment, they've bought in 100%, and they know how much damage one person can do that's not aligned with that vision.
I mean, like you said earlier, they left high-paying jobs for this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so they built something, they joined something because they knew what it stood for, but that's great. Well, I think one of I got a lot out of this today, just to wrap up. I think one of them was the fact that, even if a deal pencils, that doesn't mean it's a good deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
That's probably right. Yeah.
And it was kind of applied that way in business too, right? Just because a guy performs might not mean he's a good fit.
Exactly right. Yeah,
So,
and it takes some perspective to see that.
Hey there, it's Peter Murphy with Buying Tampa Bay. Are you an investor who has ever wanted to own real estate in Tampa Bay? Or do you currently have real estate and want to grow your portfolio, add a few new investment properties? Or maybe you just need some awesome property management to de-stress your life. Well, here's what I found. HomeProp is hands down the best real estate investment brokerage in Tampa Bay. And they can help you build wealth in real estate, which is right in line with our podcast's mission to build wealth in real estate. And not just wealth as in dollars and cents, but in the quality of your life, the quality of your community, and just enriching what exists around you. So you want to learn more? Click on the link to HomeProp in the podcast description and give them a shot.